overwhelmingly passed there, so that's the good news. As President Trump really, it's as he kind of continues to, at least somewhat. I mean, things have calmed down. He did take the off ramp, so I'm going to give him credit for that. I'm going to give him credit for that. Like that's a very, very big deal. But it's like you never know, and you never know with the people in his administrations. What if Iran does do something, or somehow, some way, Mike Pompeo and these neocon people who Trump has foolishly put in his administration and have been dying to go to war with Iran, so much so that they even got Trump to assassinate one of their top generals without even knowing what would happen, just because they were sure that this would actually would finally start their much long desired war with Iran. So like, that's what they want to do. Like, that is their goal here. So again, while 8 Democrats voted against this resolution, 4 did not vote. So pretty much 12 Democrats who are complete warmongering people. I could use a little bit stronger words here. Like, take a stand. It's President Donald Trump. It's President Donald Trump here. You have sent, most of you have probably spent days and days and days railing against him, calling him unresponsible, saying that he lies, he's mistrustworthy, and he wanted the full power to get Americans involved into a conflict where he could put tons and tons of American lives at risk. Like, what is wrong with you? I just don't get it. So today, the House exercised our constitutional duty, said Representative Ilhan Omar following the vote. We remind the occupant of the White House that the power to declare war resides with the Congress. Our message is clear: no war with Iran. Eliza Slotkin, the lead sponsor of the resolution, said it should serve to make clear the president wants to take us to war if the president wants to take us to war. By the way, it's great that if he can. It doesn't matter. I mean, he can if he wants, but he's got to get the authorization from Congress. He's got to do it the right way. He's got to sponsor the war machine the right way. That's a quote that's so indicative of the Democratic Party. Like, if you take a look at the two differences of these quotes, you got Ilhan Omar, no war with Iran. That's simple. Nancy Pelosi, Eliza Slotkin. I mean, if he wants to go to war, he's got to talk to us first. Like, that's how it's going to have to work, okay? Like, what? Like, take a slightly bolder stand than, like, dipping one toe in the water? Like, come on. Like, dipping your pinky toe? This is a tantamount to literally dipping your pinky toe in the water and just being, I don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah, so even House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said in a statement that the resolution is non-binding, and it must now pass the U.S. Senate. It still has real teeth because it serves as an official statement from the U.S. Congress. But again, maybe in another world that would mean something, but Trump and his administration, do you think they're going to give a real damn about the official statement from Congress? Like, no. If they want to go to war, and this war powers resolution is not going to pass, they are going to go to war. Even as Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said earlier in the day, the measure has as much force of law as a New Year's resolution, which is, I mean, kind of accurate at this point. Pelosi countered by saying the president power vests in the resolution could not be diminished by having the president veto it or not. Okay, I don't know what that really means. I mean, I'm pretty confident that you could veto a war powers resolution if you wanted, but I don't know. Anyway, in a statement, so Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, celebrated the resolution's approval in the House and said the people do not want an endless war with Iran. They want diplomacy and de-escalation, noting that the resolution may not ultimately prevent Trump from taking further belligerent actions. Pocan said that more must be done to curb the worst instincts of the president and those Republicans backing his hawkish, reckless foreign policy. Now, Pocan added members of Congress should move to pass both legislation by Representative Barbara Lee to repeal the 202 authorization for use of military force. Yeah, these are no-brainers here. In Iraq, in a bill passed by Representative Ro Khanna and co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders in the Senate that would prohibit any funding for a military attack on Iran. So just pretty much shutting down the whole idea of we could go to war, because things are at a good place right now. Like, they've had their attack. It seems as though they're standing down. The U.S. is standing down. Obviously, they blew up a missile, but that's most likely by accident. It wasn't directed in any way at the U.S. Some sort of accident, some sort of mistake there. But if we really want to maintain the peace, at least as Democrats and members of the Democratic Party, this is something the House should immediately take up next, because it could have consequences for broader conflicts here that this could be around for. So Congress has been silent for too long, says Bocon. It's time we reclaim our constitutional authority over the military action from presidents intent to fight forever wars. Barbara Lee says the American people do not want another unnecessary war of choice in the Middle East. This critical resolution helps put a check on the Trump administration's reckless and irrational military actions against Iran. Today we begin to assert our constitutional duty, but we go further to restore our duty in matters of war and peace. It's critical that Congress continues the important work and take up my bill, H.R. 2456, to repeal the 2002 AUMF and Congressman Khanna's bill to prevent any funds for war with Iran absent explicit authorization. My 2002 AUMF was included with a bipartisan support in the House passed fiscal year 2020 NDAA, but stripped by Senate Republicans from the final bill. Ahead of the vote, Khanna explained why it's so vital for lawmakers to do exactly that. For generations from now, the world is going to look back at our government and wonder why we are so obsessed with military interventions across the globe. I mean, it's a question that kind of makes sense if you think about it. So passage in the House came as Americans took the streets, really in massive numbers, to nationwide, really, to participate in the No War with Iran demonstrations organized by progressive advocacy and anti-war groups. Shout out to Code Pink. Yeah, so ahead of the marches this week, the advocacy group Indivisible, one of the coalition of members, said the people will be in the streets and it will be voted in 2020. Remember where lawmakers stood on the issue of war and peace. And so yeah, it's going to be a real question. Has really the corporate media learned anything? Like, since 2003, as they welcome back literally the same Iraq war hawks to make the case for Iran, which really makes the case now that nothing has ever changed. Time is a flat circle, but we descend slower and slower over time. It's like kind of like concentric circles, like things are on the same plane, but somehow still getting worse. Like the same things are happening, but just worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Variations of them somehow. I don't really know how that's possible. Someone else probably explained that to me. So yeah, I'm still personally working out. Anyway, so as President Donald Trump spent the early days of 2020 instigating and then backing down from a potentially catastrophic confrontation with Iran, corporate media in the U.S. turned to the very same people who promoted the country's worst foreign policy disaster in a generation to advocate for repeating the mistakes of 2 decades ago. The decision of networks and cable news outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News to bring on a stream of past advocates for and architects of the 2003 invasion of Iraq was pinned by progressives who watched with horror and frustration the same arguments were deployed in service of all-out war with Iran. And the crazy thing, the real crazy thing, this is from Owen Higgins, staff writer at Common Dreams with a report here, is like just how many of these people still are able to like exist and get a job and still make tons and tons and tons of money, which they have, and they're still making on a yearly basis, just reeling it in from this whatever work at like hedge funds or think tanks or whatever the case may be. Like, they are still allowed back on TV. I mean, I get Fox, but it's like, Jesus. It's War Inc. all over again, tweeted the Nation's David Zurin. No voices calling for peace, no voices critical of empire, just established media and current and former Pentagon officials who feed off the trillion-dollar war machine. So it really seems like there's a lot of interesting stuff here going on with this, because the way I understand it, because keep in mind I was born in 2003, but the way I understand it, in the wake of 9/11 and in the lead up to the Iraq War, especially with America's kind of lust for revenge, like lust for blood of the people who have spilled a lot of blood in their own soil, like pretty much we were willing to accept anything. Like not exactly anything. We were still obviously somewhat critical, but like pretty much the way that the Bush administration did not have to work very hard. The media did not have to work very hard to convince us that A, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and B, he was going to use them imminently. We need to go to war to stop this, to maybe prevent another 9/11, because Iraq was where it was at. So Trump's ordered assassination of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani on January 3rd proved catalyst for escalated tensions between U.S. and Iran, and also opened the door for news outlets to welcome back some of the key Bush-era war cheerleaders. The more things changed, the more they stay the same, wrote Rolling Stone's Tim Dickinson, saying, quote, "The Trump administration's sudden, violent confrontation with Iran stands in contrast to the methodical march to war with Iraq under George W. Bush and his new conservative cabinet in 2003. Dickinson wrote, but the rhetoric around the two conflicts has been strikingly similar, because it's very interesting here. The people that sold the war to the Rubes, the Rubes have now been replaced by those people. So the people who sold it, like people like the Dick Cheneys of the world, the Ari Fleischers of the world, the people who didn't actually believe the stuff, when they were selling it to the Christian conservatives and conservatives in general, it was kind of like a godly war, the next kind of crusade. Now that there's these people who actually believe running our government, running our military, running our country, people like Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State, and people like Mike Pence coming out. You look at the things he said in the Senate or the House or whatever the hell he was before the Iraq War. It was everywhere. It was everywhere. The kind of zealotry on hand. So now they're out there. They're running the country. They're making these decisions, desperately trying to, I think, get us back into another conflict of this nature. So anyway, Soleimani's death by drone strike was celebrated in real time by former Bush press secretary Ari Fleischer, who spent the run-up to the Iraq War telling the public the necessity of the conflict, saying, quote, "I think it's entirely possible this is going to be a catalyst inside Iran where people start celebrating the killing of Soleimani." And literally, he again was flanked by Jason Chaffetz. I don't know when he was around, but this is a good one. Bush administration advisor Karl Rove. Yes, he's back, for all those who remember in 2003. In contrast to Fleischer's predictions, Soleimani's funeral and remembrance ceremonies over the weekend turned out mourners enraged at the assassination across Iran in the millions. Former VP Dick Cheney's similar claim in 2002 that U.S. troops in Iraq would be welcomed as liberators was about equally true. Fleischer was nonetheless welcome back to Fox on Tuesday and Wednesday to give his thoughts on the conflict and attack Democrats for questioning the Russian war in any way. It's concerning, to say the least, to see some of the biggest backers of the Iraq war and abject failure that, coupled with the ongoing war in Afghanistan, has cost the United States trillions of dollars and thousands of lives, are publicly, in some instances gleefully, opining on the potential impact of war with Iran, and in some cases even using the same rhetorical stylings to do so, says Vox's Jane Coaston. The similarity in rhetoric, which I think is absolutely true there. On MSNBC, which bills itself as a liberal alternative to the right-wing behemoth in Fox, host Ari Melber on January 7th in the wake of the Iranian retaliation for assassination spoke to former General Barry McCaffrey, who called for a devastating response against Iran. So again, this is the so-called liberal network with the so-called liberal guy, and it's like, this is again after these 15 million. This is after these two air bases that were hit, like these really, frankly, weak attack against the United States. No one was killed. They were warned ahead of time. Like, the situation was made towards a clear mood with, at the same time, saving face, and at the same time, de-escalation, because they know that the biggest consequence of this is going to be Iraqi civilians, Iranian civilians, civilians in the Middle East. I think they want to really severely limit American activities if they can here, which makes all the sense in the world. But this is a response from this guy, General McCaffrey, before he even, I think, knew what was going on. He says, quote, "Our only good response at this point is an overwhelming dominance of air and naval power that can be deployed against the Iranian homeland." Again, literally nobody died, but he's like, destroy them. Yeah, it's really insane. Again, unmentioned in the segment was McCaffrey's position on the board of Raytheon, the weapons supplier that probably